I'm very pleased to introduce you to two of my longest term, not oldest, longest term friends in the marketing and technology services and solutions space. Right next to me is Silas. Rob is the Group Director of Analytics for WCG and recently was the head of our Marketing Cloud practice at Magnet 360, so we go way back. Rob is a digital marketing industry veteran who's been helping companies find success on the web for more than a decade. Rob is focused on one thing, providing insights from online marketing data that lead to more successful marketing and sales results. Rob's latest passion is helping companies determine how to unsilo their online marketing tactics using technology, data, and the power of human analytics and insights to integrate web, marketing automation, social, mobile, analytics, and CRM together. The result? Cross-channel marketing strategies that take customer engagement, loyalty, and lifetime value to new levels. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, John.
Next to him is my friend Curt Olson. Curt is an enterprise business development for ExactTarget. He's got more than 10 years experience in enterprise SaaS software sales for ExactTarget, who is a global provider of cross-channel interactive marketing platforms and now part of the Salesforce.com family of brands. Curt has been awarded numerous regional and channel sales performance awards and works with some of the region's top brands to develop and implement digital marketing strategies. Curt has a deep understanding of SaaS platforms, cross-channel digital marketing, infrastructure, e-commerce, data management, CRM, software integration, analytics, and partner platforms. So, welcome, Curt.
I wondered where you got that. That's LinkedIn, right?
Oh, I'm pretty smart about navigating social for content. And myself, I am here mostly to facilitate the conversation and pick the brains of these thought leaders and subject matter experts, but I'm also here as a voice for marketing. I lead the marketing team at Magnet 360, and obviously we're a B2B services organization, and so that's where my perspective comes in. If there's anything that I can share, it's from that vantage point. So let's take it away. Today we promised that we were going to talk about a few topics, including the evolution of email marketing, big data, where to start, what to look for, mobile and social and the impact that has on marketing to the individual at scale, and also new developments in the Salesforce ExactTarget Marketing Cloud, because many in our community are invested in that product one way or another, either in the CRM side, sales, service, or marketing, and we're kind of curious about how companies are using it and what's coming next. So I want to just start out with a really broad question. And this comes from the fact that I've known both of you for at least 12 years each. So we've been hanging out in this circle of marketing technology for quite a long time. And when you look back, it's pretty profound, all that has changed in the marketer's landscape in the past 10 years. How would you summarize, from your career position, those changes? What would you say about the changes in the marketing ecosystem in the past 10 years?
I'll go. So I think the biggest thing is something that we probably all know and we've all heard talked about a lot, and that is the fact that the relationship between the customer and the brand has absolutely flipped, right? And whereas 10 years ago and even longer, and again we've all heard this, but I think we all really have to absorb really what it means and the implication of it, and the fact that 10 years ago even brands really did control the message. Right, and now we all know that the consumer controls the message, and no one would argue that. That's a very obvious point. But I think that the opportunity that provides for all of us as brands, I think about it as really now, because especially with technology and with social and with mobile, it's almost democratized the ability to engage with customers, right? So a lot of people look at the kind of where we're at today as maybe being scary because brands don't control the message now, consumers are in control. I really see that, and when I talk to clients, I really see it as a huge opportunity, because no longer are the people that have the most dollars necessarily going to win. Right? It's not about the biggest budget. It's really about how can you understand people's behaviors and how can you create campaigns that can engage with them. Right. And you don't necessarily have to have huge budgets for that, and the reason for that is because technology enables that now, right? So as we sit here today, and I'd love to have some more conversation about that, we all know those pieces exist, but I think too many times brands get nervous about the fact that, yes, consumer is in control, right? And the fact is that that's true, but if you really get smarter now about studying and understanding the behavior of the consumer and knowing really when to engage with them and how to engage with them, you can do that. I mean, it certainly helps to have money and budget, and paid media is certainly important. But you can do that now, and you can engage with them through social and through mobile channels, where you can do more guerrilla tactics and be successful, right? So that, I think that's one important implication of the fact that the relationship has switched, and technology we know has enabled that.
That's right. And we're going to drill in on some of those topics a little more thoroughly yet this afternoon on mobile, social, and what that's done to create that flip, and how companies can tune into those opportunities and be aware of the challenges. And Curt, you've been part of ExactTarget for more than 10 years. So talk about the pace of innovation in a space like this, and how your clients who are marketers, their perspective on keeping up with that pace.
Right. So I think about 10 years ago, 13 years ago actually, when ExactTarget had started. And it was a pretty humble initiative, but the thinking was, wow, what a great way to actually start to connect with people directly. The notion originally, actually, ExactTarget was founded on a guy who owned a set of dry cleaners, and he recognized that people were dry cleaning their shirts, and he could maybe impact lifetime value by increasing their dry cleaning one shirt a week. And he recognized that he had a certain set of data. He knew who they were. He had their garage codes in a lot of cases. And so he built a little tool that actually started to facilitate this one-to-one communication. It still, frankly, when you look at it now, was very much one-to-many. But at the time, it felt very one-to-one. And you talk about the 10-year evolution. And to Rob's point, we have so much more ability to understand our consumer. The consumer may be rightfully in control of the brand at this point, but as marketers, there's such a fantastic opportunity to call this data to make to determine what is the relevant data, right? People talk about big data, and I like to talk about relevant data because there's data overload in some cases, but that's been such a seismic shift. And when I first started my professional career, which incidentally I'm shooting for the 50 under 50, so we had massive SideQuest disks. I don't know if people remember this. I was in database marketing early on, and CRM was kind of this myth. And in fact, it looked to me like it was a great thing to sell back in the late 90s because people were paying a lot of money for it and it didn't work. But it was this idea that you would develop this large data set against particular individuals, right? And it's taken a long time to come back to it, but I mean we're at it now, and nobody thought of social, and nobody thought of all these other sources of data, and it's just really exciting and amazing to see how far it's come. It's
exciting and it's big, and we're going to talk a little bit about big data today, but I can insert here a little bit of a marketer's perspective on this evolution and the impact and the scaling of it. And I distinctly remember, and I've been with Magnet 360, previously with Reside, a company that was acquired by and became a Magnet 360 for 12 years. So all of this history is within that time frame, and I distinctly remember the early beginnings of my marketing career and having about 5 tools that I needed to know how to operate between the phone, email, basic website, print advertising, maybe some sponsorships. There was a limited tool set that I had to know how to do. And that tool set has certainly grew and scaled. And I remember distinctly in 2006, 2007, I went away on maternity leave with my second baby, and I was gone 12 weeks. And when I came back, I wrote an article about how the world had flipped on its head in the 12 weeks I was gone. And that article was published, I think it was in maybe Ventures magazine or whatever it was back then. But I came back to an environment that had all new terminology. There were blogs, and there were wikis, and there were microblogs, and none of that was part of the business-to-business conversation, even in 2006 in a meaningful way. And so things started to truly change around 2007, and since then, the number of tools that myself and my peers are expected to evaluate, understand, know how to implement, and execute against to drive a marketing strategy in a highly competitive, noisy environment is exponential. I think we talked earlier about slides that we've seen that show the evolution of the, just even in social tools, what's available, right? So It's pretty mind-bending, and today hopefully we'll talk about all the bigness that there is, and then we'll take it down to some really tactical takeaways of, you know, where do you focus? Because there's so much to know and think about. So where do you focus? Knowing that there are probably a number of different roles and industries represented in the room, so I hope we'll give you all a little something to go home with. So that's the past 10 years. Today, both of you referred to the consumer or the customer driving the conversation. I read an article recently that was really interesting, and I've actually since picked up on a couple different articles referencing the same idea, challenging the idea that there is any relevance anymore to B2C, business to consumer, versus B2B, business to business, but that because of all the integration and access to conversation, we're really living in an era of human to human or business to individual, H to H, B to I. What are your thoughts on that and the changing dynamics in the relationships, and whether there still is or is not relevance to seeing marketing disciplines distinctly between B2B, B2C?
I think it's about a buyer, you know, in the end, right? And it's about fostering the relationship with the buyer, regardless of whether it's a consumer or it's someone who's buying your business product. It is person to person, and knowing what it is that interests them, that is compelling to them, that is we talk a lot about people's personal wins. You know, what's their personal win with regards to your product? I mean, this information is available to you, and it allows you to tune that message to them. And one of the beautiful things about social is you can hear back from them, and you can hear back from them, and sometimes quickly, and sometimes with maybe things that are valuable input that maybe you didn't want to hear. And I know Rob works, you know, quite a bit with this notion, but I mean that's a big shift. And but you see that on a consumer as well as a business side. I mean, there's plenty of tweets I've seen over time when somebody gets frustrated with a particular software platform or a particular product that is really, you know, it's industry buzz as opposed to consumer buzz.
So when I think about that question, one thing that I kind of look back on and chuckle a little bit was, you know, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago when social media was really starting to spike, right? And we all saw this again too. There's a lot of conversation about, well, is social media going to disintermediate channels, you know, and even when digital got big, you know, from a B2B perspective, are you going to need the channel anymore because now you can go direct to the consumer? And you know, what we've all seen is that certainly that hasn't happened, right? And as Curt said, I do a lot of work with social and social data, especially unstructured social data. So that's one of my areas of passion and expertise. And you know, what we see there, and B2Bs ask me a lot, they say, well, from a social listening perspective, what should we do? Because there's not a lot of conversation about our brand. Right, so if I'm a business to business, how do I leverage that? And what we see is exactly what Curt talked about. You know, we see more and more companies now that are working with their business to business, but they're working with their channel because now we can see the conversation from the end consumer, right? And so, you know, I've worked with a number of companies, and we've worked with a couple when I was here at Magnet in the food industry, where they're going out and the food manufacturer is going and listening to the conversation from the consumer about a food product, let's say of a fast food restaurant. If a fast food restaurant is part of their channel, they'll look and say, for Culver's as an example, Culver's launched a new shake, you know, a new flavor of a shake, or when McDonald's has their Shamrock Shakes, right? What are people talking about around those, and what's the sentiment, and what can we learn from that conversation that then as a manufacturer I can bring to the channel and help them learn and help them understand what the end consumer is saying about them. So that's one example, but you know, there's a lot of question always about how B2B can leverage social and leverage the insights from social, and that's one great way to do it. So I agree it's person to person. I'm not willing to say B2B is bad, right? Because it's a channel, that's how you go to market. But you can leverage what you can get, insights and engagement from social listening if you're a B2B, just as much as if you're B2C, by looking for that conversation with that end consumer, and then using that to help the channel. You know, versus actually disintermediating the channel. Yeah.
Well, I want to read a little quote that I pulled from the article, one of the articles I was referencing. And this is an article written, published recently on socialmediatoday.com. The author is Brian Kramer. I don't know his full background, but this is what he says. Marketing increasingly strives to become one-to-one, with solutions to collect and wrangle the big data about us to serve up more personalized offers and experiences. On the other hand, social has become a more public and vast medium where things we share skyrocket quickly to a one-to-many experience. The dichotomy between marketing and social has actually flipped, and it's out of balance. Social and marketing need to work together to personalize individual conversations as well as deliver shared global experiences that crowds of common values can benefit from. So I thought that was an interesting take, and it is an interesting dichotomy between how hard we're looking at what data can give us on intelligence on the individual level. Meanwhile, the pipeline social gives us to the many, right? So looking at every buyer, whether they're a consumer buyer or they're a business buyer, as an individual who certainly has, likes, dislikes, goals, wants, there is a fine line, I think, between when a brand interacts with me as a buyer, between while they know me really well, enough to put something in front of me that's compelling, or they know me way too well and this is creepy, right? So how do people want brands to know them, and where is the fine line between enough to be relevant and engaging, or you're just too much in the personal space?
I think that's a great question. I think it's a really hard question to answer, right? But I think the reality of it is, right, consumers want us to engage with them when they want us to engage with them, right? So their expectation is, I believe, and they may not say this, we see a lot of surveys where people say, well, social listening and all this, it's creepy, right? Because the fact of the matter is, if you're putting things in the public realm, whether you want to say it or not, your expectation is people are going to be listening, they're going to be watching. And the reality is, I think consumers expect that we're listening to their conversations. They also expect, though, that we have the right sense, to your point,
common sense,
to know when to engage with them, right? And so certainly the default, the easy way to go is to say, well, let's make sure we engage with them when we know there's an issue, right? And when they're overtly saying that there's an issue, that's obviously the point in time to really start to engage with them. And so I think, again, the challenge for all of us is consumers expect us to be listening, but they expect us to be smart about when we engage. And many times, engaging in the higher end of the funnel, when we see some conversations in social that might be a pre-purchase, that does get to the creepy side of things sometimes, right? Because the consumer probably doesn't want you in there yet. They're still making their decisions. If they want you in there, they'll probably ask and say that, right? So I think we all have to be really smart about understanding behaviors, understanding personas of people at that individual level, and really be smart about how we make those decisions. We know there's certain conversations that you can't engage with, but there's a lot in that gray area, and we just, again, we have to be smart about understanding behaviors and using common sense to know when to do that engagement.
Right. So just because the data exists doesn't mean we need to act upon it. And to put that into the B2B perspective, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. So on that topic, do you have any rules of thumb about when and how to engage with people? It sounds like that there's that sort of common sense should guide it, but what specifically should we avoid or sort of try for?
Ask them.
Ask
I think
them.
it's a great place to start, right? I mean, Rob speaks of
Preferences.
social, and Rob speaks of unstructured data and gathering sentiment. There's another side of this that says, let's talk about Seth Godin. I'm sure we all are familiar with Seth Godin. He goes back now 15 years, but the whole notion of he kind of defined permission, right? It was pre-social, but it has a lot of social implications in so much as you now have the consumer saying, yeah, I want to hear from you, but here's how I want to hear from you. It initially started with, yes, I want to hear from you, right? But over this 13, 15 years of development, it becomes, I want to hear from you. Here's what I want to hear from you. Here's the way I want to hear from you. Here's what I don't want to hear. And you've got that whole explicit side of things where people are actually expressing it to you, and you see this in opt-in pages. You see this with dialogue at the point of purchase. You see this through data gathering, but then it extends beyond that into, again, more recordable, structured data, if you will. We start talking about web analytics behavior. You start talking about card frequency behavior, and so many other measured points of engagement that I hear companies speak of loyalty, and in a traditional sense, you think of loyalty as assigning points. But this idea of loyalty says we know enough about these individuals and their behavior that we can start to help be relevant to them, right? And this is where you set the borderline on creepy, but if it's done right, it's just natural, right? It's just a beautiful thing. You abandon a product on a website and a purchase, and that product starts showing itself up very subtly as you move, through the next few weeks, and it's maybe buried in an email someplace, or it's showing up in a banner ad. I think the creepy side of that says, I go to Weston or the Starwood website and I look for rooms in Naples, and the next thing I know, for the next 3 days, I've got Naples rooms in front of me on every website I go to, right? That's not the natural piece. That's not the one that feels right. So I think there's enough information there for marketers to start making decisions that are just feel natural. And if it feels creepy to you, it's likely creepy to them.
Yep. And I'll interject with a B2B perspective here as well. And this is where it's a really important point to make about the common sense, experience, and intelligence of the people you hire and put in charge of these programs and behind the curtain. There are a lot of things that we could dig into on social channels and create outreach through the Magnet 360 brand, for instance, on Twitter, that would appear creepy. Or for instance, our marketing automation integration tells me, if you're a known person, and all of you are now because you've come to our events, so beware, you're a known person. So my marketing automation tool is going to start scoring you in your lead level by telling me which web pages you visit or which emails you open. And that intelligence is not unique to Magnet 360. That's what marketing automation is about. It's about an understanding of those individuals, their behaviors, and their interactions with your brand. And there are good ways we can use that information. For instance, your engagement in today's event will result in some strategic and custom content that you'll see come your way that's intentional, because we know you've engaged in this topic and we're segmenting you with that interest level. However, it wouldn't probably make you feel really great if you visited the capabilities page at the Magnet 360 website and in 5 minutes you got a call from an account manager here saying, I saw that you were looking at our CRM capabilities.
Or you hit the page and it said, hi, Jen.
Right, creepy big brother, right? So it's very important as you build your social media programs and you build your marketing programs that you really vet out the people on your team that are developing the strategies and that have the voice behind your brand, so that they're taking and using common sense in structuring the interactions at the individual and mass levels. And that's part of the theme we're going to talk about at next month's iSeries, is the common sense approach to social media.
And I've heard big data referred to as a sharp knife, right? I mean, so you can do a lot of damage with it, you can do a lot of great stuff with it. I think in the end, though, it is about you delivering value to the consumer, right? It's not about manipulation, it's about knowing them well enough to motivate their loyalty. And again, we're not talking points, we're talking about this, this groundswell of commitment, because you give back to these people, right? That what you offer them is right.
Yep.
And that was the word I was going to say too. And it's give before you expect to get anything back, right? And that whole notion of when you engage, provide social capital to that consumer in the first engagement, and continue to do that, but set the tone by giving before you expect to receive.
I think we could all probably share some examples as we think through our interactions with brands about this brand clearly is doing it right because I'm attracted to their messaging. I'm activated by it, and this brand is not doing it right. And I have to say, as a great example for me as a consumer, when I travel, I really love to stay at Kimpton hotels. I think they're really unique, they're special, their customer experience is generally top-notch. But the thing they're doing really right, and I don't know who their social media manager is, but they're watching, they're listening in real time, and they're paying attention. And for them, that's got to be kind of a round-the-clock initiative, because people staying at hotels aren't just staying during business hours. They're generally there on the off business hours. Whenever I'm at a Kimpton hotel, I test my theory on their excellent service by tweeting something about where I am, what I'm doing. And every single time, now you're all going to want to go stay in Kimpton and use this trick, but right now I'm their favorite, so I don't want to lose my status. But every time I go, they know I'm a loyal customer, and they send something to my room, or a note from the manager, or a tray of chocolates, or I was there celebrating my anniversary, and they sent up champagne and So they do a fantastic...
Wait a minute, that's creepy a little bit too, isn't it?
No, it was not. It was fantastic. I already know they have a master key to my room. I mean, they could be as creepy as they want to be, but they do it really well. They do it really well. So I have to say, like, there are some brands that are ahead of the trends, and not all of those individual one-to-one touch points are scalable. But what they're doing well is they know who their raving fans are. You know, they know that if they invest a little bit in me, I'm going to tweet to my whole world about how great they are, right? They know that I potentially could influence others. So if you know inside of your brand who your big influences are, that's a great place to start making an investment. Let's talk a little bit just about terminology, just to make sure we're all on the same level set, same page here. In talking with customers, I've noticed that sometimes there's some confusion between marketing automation and email marketing, or the perception that marketing automation is simply glorified email marketing, or it's only really for big businesses. Curt, this is the world that you live in, and this is an evolution that you've seen over time. How would you define these two disciplines? What makes them different? What are the similarities? How would businesses know what they need between marketing automation, email marketing?
Yeah, fair enough. So from my perspective, marketing automation encapsulates email, right? So email is a component of marketing automation. It certainly can stand alone. The notion that you're acting on data or data, right? So an event happens. Subsequently, you are beginning some level of a curriculum of messaging. Let's stick with email for a second. You know, it's a data. It's an event. Something happens. So today. I'm sorry, I'm going on vacation tomorrow. I should know.
He's already got beach brain. Get your brain off the beach. Join us here.
Today's the 20th, and something happens a week out. So you actually can set a curriculum of messaging. This is something that's existed with email for quite some time, and we've seen it cross over into digital, all other digital environments. And so the idea now that the communication channel, they're created equal, whether it's a mobile or an SMS or a social interaction or an email or a direct mail piece or a telephone call or whatever the case may be. You're starting to see this distribution of touch points, right? So when you talk about automation, you're not just talking now necessarily about a digital interaction, or you're talking about a digital interaction in a lot of different environments. At ExactTarget Marketing Cloud, we are starting to do a lot of device messaging, which is interesting. We are starting to message into cars. We're starting to message into refrigerators.
Things, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's
like buy more ketchup.
It's fascinating, like how many times you open the refrigerator. I mean, there's this amount of data, but I think it gets back to automation, right? Again, you border on creepy, but if used right, you can offer forward, great value and great experience to that individual that you're communicating with. And so I think marketing automation is it's a broad statement, and I think in some cases it's defined by the user more than it is by the industry, because the industry is relatively limitless, really, when you think about it.
And how do you feel when someone uses the term email blast?
Well, you know how I feel about that.
I'm just poking you with that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's an industry term, but even early on, it's the notion of one to many, right? And when we were selling email really early on, and you had a little bit of data, even if it's a first name, right? From our perspective, it's like, that's not a blast. You're starting to engage people, and you're trying to do it one-on-one. So the idea of a blast is, it always rubbed me the wrong way. I try and correct people, but after a while I gave up.
So if you have one thing to take away from here tonight, it's we need to replace the terminology email blast with email engagement.
Don't ask me what the answer is.
All right, great. So we talked a little bit about permission, and you started to touch on this, but I just wanted to quickly elaborate on it. How permission marketing has changed over the years based on the changes that we discussed earlier. So most of my email subscriptions in the past were either subscribed or unsubscribed, and I've noticed a definite change in the level of detail I can provide about what and how I prefer to interact with the brands that I want to hear from. And a lot of that is driven, I think, by all the different channels now available to nurture that relationship. So talk about maybe the opportunity lost for a company that's still just using opt-in or opt-out and might not be asking the question of, would you like to hear from us by text message? Would you like to hear from us by email? Would you like to hear from us on sales or on these things, these things? What is the opportunity for that diversification of permission, or the opportunity lost by not using those kind of layers?
Well, if we're talking email, we're starting to talk about something that is federally regulated, right? So we have the Can-Spam Act, and one of the tenets of the Can-Spam Act says if someone's opted out, they've opted out, and really they've shut the door on you. And it was a pretty binary. And I think what you started to see, and actually media really kind of led the charge here. New York Times did a great job early on, in so much as if you provide an individual to express their preferences, they're apt to give you more information, right? So even media is great because you can tell them what you want to know, how frequently you want to know it, what channel you want to know it by, and you can certainly overkill preference pages. But on the other hand, it gives you fantastic insight, and it allows the individual to start to choose how they want to be messaged to you. Now, the flip side of that, when you talk about an opt-out, right, binary, right, and you still see a lot of this. I'm in, I'm out. You know, would you like to unsubscribe? Yes. That's a huge loss, because likely your subscriber doesn't want to unsubscribe. They just don't want to be touched in a certain way, whether that's a frequency or with a particular message. And so you now regularly see people say, you know, before you opt out, you know, would you like to change your preferences? And sometimes it's pretty overt and it's a direct communication. But a lot of times you have a preference page. People go, they sign up. You get an email, you choose to say, you know what, I might want to opt out of this, and you're pushed back to the preference page versus a one-click opt-out, and where you push back to the preference page, and you can change your preferences. Of course, you have to allow them the ability to emphatically opt out as well. But you want to do everything you can to not lose this person, right?
That's great.
Can I interject a question?
Yeah.
Spam. I just heard today about the Canadian anti-spam regulation that's coming forward in July. I don't know, Curt or if anyone on the panel is very familiar with that. Do you have any interpretation of what that means? Just because I know it's not just multi-recipient emails, it's even one-to-one email, and it extends beyond email, social, and other channels of interaction. Do you guys have any?
I'm just going to paraphrase for our recording purposes that you're asking about the upcoming changes in Canadian law on permission-based marketing and what impact there might be, which is a topic I know nothing about. So
I didn't know Canada had laws.
Cans.
Yeah. I like that. That's
We're all
good.
moving to Canada and marketing there.
You know what, Ben? I can't even speak to it, right? I mean,
well, keep an eye out for it.
It sounds fascinating.
Does anybody else in the audience have insight to Canadian spam laws?
We don't know a lot about it, except that it is coming in. It's much stricter than the U.S. Laws. There's a lot of things where you have to prove you have permission to contact. There's different rules for business to business, but there's rules about length of engagement with the customer when you can contact them and not on a B2B basis. So we're finding out a lot more. But the other thing we know is that while it's technically, or the original was July, the likelihood is that it will roll forward at some point in time.
Okay.
But yeah, if you're going into Canada, it's a different world that will be coming into effect.
Okay, so for the recording gap there for our viewing audience, Canada's going to be complicated and it's coming, so look out.
Now, I would also direct people to go to ExactTarget. We do have a privacy and deliverability team. They spend, it's their job, right? It's all they do, and they are very tuned in with this. And there's blogs and there's other resources that certainly would be available, and I'm going to go check it out because it sounds interesting.
Now we're curious.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to derail, but
No, that's good. This is an influencer community. Some of you know things we don't know, and will point us, and then we can go look for the other answers and direct them to you. So that's great. We have a couple other things we wanted to hit on in the few minutes we still have remaining here, and part of that is we've kind of danced around this subject already. We talk about permission marketing, and when you can have them define their preferences, you learn more about them, about their interests, and we're watching their behaviors on one hand. But marketing at a one-to-one individual intelligent way at scale is quite something. And it really begins with a company's need to create personas around those individuals based on the attributes they have available, which may often exist in multiple silos, right? Or the attributes they can collect. So that's a really, depending on the size of your business, the history of all that data and the numbers involved in it, it can be quite overwhelming. So where would you recommend businesses begin in terms of starting to build customer personas?
I'm going to let Curt talk to a little bit about the technology side of it.
Talk
no, that's fine. Well, I'll start, right? I'll start, but because there's within the ExactTarget platform, there's some great tools and technology to enable building out that 360-degree view, right?
Absolutely.
But from a starting point, again, we've seen a lot of success to be able to leverage social data and social conversations to start to build out that profile. And I will tell you that it's one thing we're seeing, and maybe if I can just get a quick show of hands, how many people in the room in your companies have some kind of an active social listening program going on today? Just show of hands. Okay, so about half. I will tell you what we're seeing with social listening right now is we're seeing a massive shift in terms of the types of data collection. And that for all the social listening tools today collect keywords and conversations, and it's very hard to get at what you're talking about, Jen.
Yeah.
The information about the individual, right? It's possible to do. Magnet 360 does it. WCG, where I'm now, would do it as well. But frankly, you have to do it leveraging pretty manual means. And but now there's great crowdsourcing opportunities to start to build some of that data from social conversations. Where the shift is really taking place from the technology side of things, so I can tell you folks, and be on the lookout for this, is that tools are starting to come out now where we're starting to focus on looking at the information by the individual. So we find people that are saying relevant things in social conversations, doing the homework to understand what are their Twitter handles, what are their Facebook handles, and then tracking by that specific Twitter handle and looking at what they're saying. Sounds very simple, but it's very, very powerful because now you're starting to track at that individual level to see what those conversations are. And typically by doing that, you're eliminating a lot of the spam and a lot of the garbage in the conversations that's hard to wade through typically with social conversations. Okay. So as you talk about building out that persona, you can absolutely do it, and you can do it with social conversations. It's a good starting point because you can start to see people's whys and why they're talking about things, and put some manual things in place to go and look at their public Facebook profile, look at their public Twitter profile. But there's technology now coming down the pipe that's starting to do that in more of an automated fashion. And for example, at WCG, where I work now, we have a database literally of all the physicians in the country and their Twitter handles, and we track their discussions and what they're talking about on major healthcare types of issues. And healthcare companies obviously have a huge interest in that. And there's huge value you can drive by tracking at that individual level. And if you start to think about that and extend it, you think about marketing automation. Right? And starting to build out that 360-degree profile. Well, if you can track the social conversation at the individual level, now you can start to feed it into that, in all the other things that you've got within that profile, whether it's in CRM or in ExactTarget or where it is. So that's a major shift we're seeing in terms of the technology around social listening and social conversations. It's coming, and it's going to provide a lot of value, and you all need to be aware of that.
And to your point of the technology, again, CRM, and we refer to it as CRM 2.0, really, because now you have this ability to aggregate data and make it immediately actionable. And by that I mean gathering data, social data that Rob is speaking of, offline data, online data, behavioral data, and building that 360-degree view of the customer in an actionable environment, right? And that is something that many companies sell, and I think that really is getting to be that place where people go to at least look to define personas, right? I know there are some companies who don't like the notion of personas because it talks about segmentation to a level that they would prefer to get more granular. But to get all that data in one location is, I think, is pretty critical. And then not only is it there, but what can you do with it? Like, how can you put it into automation? How can you leverage it? How can you share it with other data systems? Whether it's taking information you have and purchase information of an individual based on their online purchases, and their trend and their, say, their abandoned cart compared to their last POS interaction at a store that then is married to a call center, where a call center receives a call, has an interaction, and can call up that individual and can then be served in a set of predictive suggested upsells, right? I mean, you're seeing this stuff now. And I mean, that's powerful, powerful stuff, and it really kind of even goes beyond a persona.
So let me give a quick case study, a little bit along those lines, Curt. One of the when I was here at Magnet, we did some work for Kraft Foods around a new product launch that they had, and so we tracked the product had been in market for about a year and a half, and it was a product like Shake and Bake, right? We all know Shake and Bake. You take the chicken, put it in the bag, shake it up, boom, my kind of meal, right? So. So we tracked social conversations that occurred around that brand at the time the brand had launched. They launched a new version of it. And then we tracked conversations 18 months later. We also took the time when we saw people that were talking about the brand, we went in and we did this part manually, but we looked to see if in their Facebook profile, if it was public, we looked at what types of things that they liked, what types of brands did they follow, what type of music did they like. We looked at that person-to-person level. We collected data from their Twitter handle of what they talked about in their Twitter stream, so we could see if they were a cook, what did they like to do? Were they like me, where I burn toast every day, right? So were they a novice cook that just want something quick and easy, or were they a more experienced chef that were using this product as part of a bigger meal? And so from that data, we created 4 personas. One that was the more experienced chef, all the way to the novice cook. And what we found for Kraft Foods, they were having a hard time getting people to repeat purchase their product. And what we found was that their marketing was all to that more experienced chef. It was all about recipe sharing, and that was great, but what we noticed was those chefs were more the innovators. They would try a new product, and then they'd move on to something else. 18 months after launch, the people talking about the product were the people like me that want something quick and easy and cheap and aren't going to take a lot of time to prepare a meal. So the takeaway for Kraft from a content perspective was the landscape has changed in terms of who's talking about this and who's buying it, from those innovators more to what we call those novices. And how you message them and how you engage them needs to be very different, because they're interested in very different things. And they took that information, tweaked their content strategy, and have started to see some really good success. So there's an example of how you can create personas but then act on them. Right, and understand from a content perspective, how do I need to engage people differently, because we're looking at very different characteristics and very different behaviors.
That's great. That's a great story segue into my next question, which is, you were giving an example of social content that was assessed, but we know there's all kinds of data. There's all kinds of data that is warehoused within our companies, and in general, we refer to all that data as big data. And there are more and more tools available to help filter, listen to, harness both social and other forms of data. And some of that can be automated, but a lot of it still relies on human interpretation and analytics. So if I have a lot of data in disparate systems, where do I start with integration and automation, or do I also need to start with a human component of analysis, interpretation, and do most companies who are trying to do this have that expertise in-house, or how are you seeing that come together?
Sure. Well, I think we'd all agree, and we talked about it here, and I think, Curt, you would agree too. The notion of too much data and not enough insights is still very prevalent, right, in the market today, and that big data is a blessing and a curse, because we've always wanted to have access to more data, but now it seems we do less and less with it, right? And so, again, where I counsel companies, and it's not only because my experience right now and where I spend a lot of my time with social listening data, but the studies, IBM just came out with a study that they did a study in 2010 that showed that 90% of big data, 90% of big data is unstructured data. It's not bits and bytes, but it's unstructured data. It's text data, it's photos, it's video. They redid the study in 2013, a lot more data out there, still the same. 90% of big data is unstructured. So when I talk to companies about big data, I say, listen, if you want to start to get at your big data problems, you have to look at data integration. And again, you've got great tools in the ET platform to start to bring those things together.
And others.
But if you want to start to really make a dent and get some great insights around big data and to take action on it, start by looking at those social conversations.
Okay.
There's great tools out there to collect that data, to your point, right? But you still need that human interaction. There's a lot of different ways to do it to really understand the inflection in the data.
Right.
Right. And to really start to be able to say, here's the action that we need to take from it. You know, if you've heard me speak before, I talk a lot about the what, the so what, and the now what. Right. And you know, you have to make sure that you're always in your analyses getting to the so what's and the now what's. And that requires a human intervention.
Yep. Yep. I've seen that play out. So a couple more quick questions for us before we just open it wide to Q&A and move into social hour where we can continue the conversation on all these things. I was just, wanting to pull up some statistics on some of these things that impact the conversation we're having today. And real quick today I came across some Pew survey data from 2013, so it's within the past 12 months, telling us that 90% of U.S. citizens today have a cell phone. 60% of those people are using smartphones. So that's the mobile component. And then when it comes to social, 73% of online adults are using social sites. And actually those stats go up when you look at the age 20 to 40, which
like
constitutes a big chunk of our business constituency. 40% of those folks are accessing and using their social sites via their smartphones, via their mobile phones. So again, talking about how the world kind of flipped on its head starting in 2007 or thereabouts, and smartphone technology, mobile technology, social, and being a consumer who's making buying decisions on the go everywhere you are, not necessarily in the stores. Talk about how that has impacted the marketer's world and the consideration that they need to give to how they interact with the individual, and what kind of content and investments, and also what impact are we seeing in marketing spend, traditional versus other mediums, to make use of this reality.
Right.
I think it's important to recognize that mobile isn't a channel unto itself, right? And I think that sometimes people say, well, we need a mobile strategy. But the fact is, we have a supercomputer in our pockets. And I think about the first computers I had right after college. We were still working with fax machines. That's the 50 under 50 thing. But we have these supercomputers in our pockets, and it provides us an amazing array of communication channels, right? Mm-hmm. You can still review your email. And people who say email is dead, you're always going to have transactional confirmations via email. Email is never going away. But now you have MMS, right? So you have the ability to actually target images and target messaging within images, which I frankly thought went away a bunch of years ago, and now it's back, and it's back in a big way. You have push messaging, you have text messaging, you have
location-based.
You have geolocational, which we could sit here and talk for 2 hours on geolocational. You have social interaction, whether it's Pinterest or whether you think about the kind of direct messaging capabilities that exist. So, when you talk about convergence and you talk about the phone, I think it's important to recognize that. Clearly that's where it's going. There's mobile ad. There's public companies that are who have gone public based on their mobile ad technology. So I think it's a testimony to the fact that that is the future. I don't think there's a whole lot of doubt about that.
And what would you guys say to the businesses that haven't yet set their sites up as responsive sites and have not yet tested all their emails against the various mobile interfaces? What should they? Yeah, what would you say?
You're killing me.
Killing me with your email blasts and your non-responsive website.
Yeah, you're killing me with your non-responsive website. Right? Mm-hmm. And you can make a website responsive fairly easily, and it doesn't have to boil the ocean, right? Mm-hmm. But it sure makes things easier, and it will facilitate me sticking around a lot longer. I'll get frustrated quickly, and I know many of you will as well, and you'll keep moving on, and you've lost them, and it's not going away. That's where we are today. Yeah.
And as we all know, we talk about technology platforms. There's great platforms out there today for all of us as marketers to take advantage of, to start to be able to engage one-on-one at scale. Right? There's a lot of great platforms out there today that can do that. Many times the challenge with those platforms is, where do we start? What do I do first? Mm-hmm. So, one thing I want to leave all of you with is as you think about cross-channel marketing and effective cross-channel marketing, from my perspective, when I talk to clients, the easiest place to start is to start to integrate email and social. Because you can learn a lot about your content strategy, obviously, from what people are talking about in social, and bring that into your email content. That's a simple little play, folks, but it's an easy one to do. It's an easy one to measure, So you can go to your CMO and say, you know, we did this over here, we learned this, we changed our content here, we sent this out in emails, look at the lift we got. So when we think about the starting points, I would leave with you, think about that one. It's a great one, it's an easy one, it's measurable, and you can show success.
And I want to piggyback on the where do we start question with just a little plug for how we help customers answer that question at Magnet 360. Oftentimes, but when we're called into a conversation, our customers want to start talking right away about how to deploy a solution or how to integrate a solution. The conversation often starts with solution, and we step back from that and talk instead about the customer journey and the customer relationship and what is the customer experience that we're hoping to achieve and what are the outcomes. And from mapping a customer journey, we can then determine the prioritization of the where things need to integrate, what systems do we need to deploy, and what solutions are which ones have the potential for greatest impact at lowest risk and fastest pace to speed to market. So that's a question, if you're sitting in any of these categories with the question of where do we start, we'd certainly be happy to help guide that conversation. And my last question, and I've got some great assets here that Curt brought through the ExactTarget Marketing Cloud that are not about the technology, but that are great reports that have been provided by Salesforce just recently, and I've been reviewing both of these on my own. We've got copies for anybody who wants to take them with tonight. The wonderful 2014 State of Marketing report, which has got just fantastic statistics to back up a lot of what we're talking about today. In all of the implications across the disciplines in marketing. And then more specifically, the 2014 Mobile Behavior Report from ExactTarget. So again, these are very easy resources and tools to scan and glean from and really weigh out your own programs around what the trends are and what's happening in the ecosystem. So please, before you leave tonight, make sure you grab a copy of each of these. And Curt, I wanted to end by asking, we've talked a lot about generalities, but specifically, Salesforce has made a really deep investment in their Marketing Cloud suite, and most recently with the acquisition of ExactTarget. And you've been in the thick of all of that, and you certainly are aware of how customers today are using ExactTarget and Marketing Cloud and where the potential is in the future. Can you just give us a quick snapshot on the common use cases today, but what's going to be available in the next 6 to 12 months? What's coming?
So how it's being used today, it is a broad spectrum. We see people using our platforms to send email one-to-many as they did in 2002. We also see this amazing pushing of the limits of, they're not pushing our system, but they're certainly pushing the limits of data availability, of channel strategy, of different levels of analytic leverage, and it's it's stunning. And I think it gets closer to this nirvana of, I don't know that necessarily I'm being communicated to. I just love that company, right? And some of that is intrinsics, and some of that has really been responsible based on a good strong strategy of the company. So where's our product go, right? I mean, there's an unbelievable amount of headroom, and as a salesperson, that's often what I talk about is, sure, you can do this today, but think about the scale and think about the opportunity and where you can go with it. And where we're starting to see a lot of changes is in the mobile locational, and I think that you're going to see that really emerge. The geolocational, and really not only are we talking about geolocational from a mobile cellular network perspective, but you're also starting to see localized networks, particularly within retail organizations, where the notion of we know where you are so far out, we know what your preferences are, we know what your spend is, we know what your abandoned cart is, all this aggregation of data. Now we know where you are, and we know what kind of message we can deliver to you to get you in, to get you engaged, and we can actually take you and carry you right to the aisle. And I think that, again, we're starting to get into the creepy side of things, but when done right and done with some benevolence,
creepy awesome.
Creepy awesome, yeah. And another thing.
Hashtag.
Another thing, right. It probably exists.
Oh, it's true.
This is a full-time job, right? And we see a lot of companies who have marketers who are responsible for so many things in so many different categories, and And these are full-time jobs, and if you truly want to embrace this kind of thing, I think that you need to look to building out your organization and say, we need somebody who's or a team who's a full-time social team. We need somebody who's, and you know, there's just not enough time in the day to be cross-functional these days.
Right, you're absolutely right. Well, and speaking of not enough time in the day, we could keep going and go. We've got 12 years worth of history that we could keep chewing on here, but to respect your time, I want to open up the floor for a couple of questions and then invite you all to stay to continue the conversation. Keep throwing questions at us and one another. Is there anything that you were just dying to hear from us today that we didn't hit on?
So in terms of retail, I think Target has done a really good job with the Cartwheel app. It's an app that is geolocation, and it sort of creates a warm feeling like you belong. And from the people I know who've used it, I've tried it out a couple of times. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's a good indication of where retail or on-site purchases might go with mobile. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think there's a strong social element there.
Yeah, well, and just to repeat the question
Right.
again, the Target Cartwheel app has had a lot of great success, and it's a great user experience, as well as, I think, you know, from using it, you feel like you're getting good deals at the same time, right? So I think you're just looking for our reactions to that, right, and what we've seen with that.
I think that you'll probably see a lot more retailers create easy-to-use interfaces like that for on the spot, in the store. I mean, I have it on my phone, and we actually have some Target folks here tonight, so if they have any perspective they want to chime in with, we're open to hearing from you. Do you?
It's all about value, right? I mean, if you don't put valuable content in the app, there's no reason to engage with it. And so you look at what people get from that, it's dollars off their receipt. That's a hard thing to replicate. And Target benefits from our deep relationships with our CPG vendors to help facilitate that app.
Yep.
But there's nothing special about it. It is giving away margin, right?
Yeah.
You can give away margin and still be profitable and make that fun. So there's a gamification component. Then you know, that's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And it's the loyalty component, right? I mean, yeah, you're giving away product, but it's also driving that level of loyalty. And what I do think about Cartwheel is the fact that, you know what, airline points programs were breakthrough when they happened, right? And now they're standard. And Cartwheel has been pretty seismic, right? They've gotten a lot of attention on it. And it could be a little bit of a redefinition of a way to engage. And I can't think of an airline, except for maybe Delta at this point, that doesn't have a frequent flyer program. And I think that, to your point, I think it's going to be adopted.
It's going to be a new thing. And I have to say that Target, of any company, Target knows the most about me if they were to put all their big data together and look at it. They did a wonderful job of targeting me on social media to get me to download that app. I can't tell you how many of their ads I ignored on Facebook before I finally did it, so I wouldn't have to see those ads anymore. And then, so now so they know me, and they know I'm they're truly their target audience. So.
Well, and I'm going to state the obvious. One second back, I'll come to you, and you said it, right? But it really truly is all about the value, right? And that the receipt value is so. I mean, it's so tangible.
Very.
But my God, it works. Right, I'll just tell you, the first time my wife used it, she literally came over to me and said, look at the deals, like, because she's one of those people, if it's a deal, she's buying it, right? She might be spending 3 times more than she should, but if it's a deal, she's buying it, right? But that was huge, perceptually that was huge for her. So the gamification, I think, and all that is great stuff, but it goes right at value, and to me, that's why it works.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was going to say the same thing. It's putting that guest in perspective. I mean, you guys kind of highlighted the whole conversation today is what does the guest want and some perceived value of it. They didn't want something super fancy that was complicated. It's a utility that lets you get deals on it. That's with the guest in the middle of it. It's self-serving for them based on what they need. So it's putting that all together and just keeping it very simple and focused has been successful for us.
That's a great little case study for us to end on, and how ideal that our Target clients were in the room to help feed into that. And one more question perhaps before we, all right, Ben raised his hand first.
Just taking a B2B specific view of one-to-one, there's a lot of really strong, deep relationships between sales reps and so forth, but historically, and I've been in B2B marketing like my whole life, and historically, from a database standpoint, the golden fields of data are around email address that are corporate and corporate phone numbers and so forth. But now, I think the churn of individuals from organization to organization and wanting to maintain one-to-one in B2B relationships, are you seeing B2B companies shifting from corporate emails to valuing Gmail and personal emails, personal phone numbers for mobile access. I would probably say social connection is another way to do that. And maybe LinkedIn's the most obvious, where it's a more up-to-date version of the old Rolodex, where you just can't necessarily keep up with CRM as well as self-manage. I haven't yet seen that really playing out in the database management, but I'm wondering if there's a new set of golden fields of contact information in B2B that hone in on the individual contact capability above and beyond the org to org.
Well, I can weigh in on that just from Magnet 360's vantage point and let you know that with the emergence of social sign-on and connecting with people through LinkedIn, I would say half of our constituents are using, at least half, are using personal email addresses attached to their LinkedIn account, because when they move from job to job or wherever they may go, that stays with them. So in terms of our database, we've often captured both the corporate email address and the Gmail address, and we make sure to match up those persons in our database so we're not duplicates. Many, and also because we're using like Eventbrite as a registration system, you all registered on Eventbrite for this event, many of our event registrants will register with their personal email addresses because that's where they want to receive reminders and notifications. They don't want that in their corporate inbox. And so we constantly are balancing the capture of information between the personal and the professional, and those worlds are coming closer together. But it's always done on that opt-in basis. We don't ask for them to provide their personal contact information, but often that is where they choose to interface with us because that's where they want our emails directed. That's where they want us referencing.
I'm still seeing personal emails being discounted by most people, and excluded even from the communications.
I think about me personally. Half of this is my personal brand and my personal development and who I am personally. Sure, I'm associated to a company. I think that's important. I think there's a lot of applicable messages specific to me within my role as an employee of a particular company. But then I'm also Curt, and I do offer value someplace else, and I think I think the point you make is a great one, right? And I think we all feel the same, right? We're all here, and absolutely my personal email address is connected to LinkedIn, not because I'm planning on going anywhere, but I want to be known as me as opposed to known as
the entity that you work for. Definitely. Absolutely. Well, again, I want to encourage and invite you to stay. We have a ton of great food and more beverage out in our lobby, and we would love to get to know all of you, answer any questions you have, or hear your perspective. And if you do have an interest in being part of our community of influence through a case study, guest blog, please talk with me, and my team and I will work with you to see if there's a fit. So thanks again for coming out, and thank you so much to my friends.
Thank you, Jen.